Welcome everyone to the Reading Systems panel. I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Wendy Reed and I'm from Rakuten Kobo. And today we have four excellent panelists who are here to represent various reading systems, but also user perspectives as reading system users. I'm going to see if I can try and keep us to about 35 minutes so that we have time for about 10 minutes for questions. If you have a question, throughout the session, feel free to put it in the chat if you don't want to forget it. Otherwise, save it to the end and we'll do, hands up method. If we run out of time for questions, we do have a channel in Slack. I will put the name of it in the chat, but there is a chat in Slack. So if we happen to run out of time for questions, go to that channel, feel free to post them there and we'll find time to answer them. And I think that's it for housekeeping. Let's get started. Why don't we start with introductions? I'm going to start in order of who I can see. Rick, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, Rick Johnson with Vital Source.
Thank you, Rick. And Lars.
Hey, I'm Lars. I'm a product manager at et cetera, at Colibrio Software in Gothenburg, Sweden.
And Daniel.
Hey, everybody. Well, tonight I'm mostly representing EDR Lab, the European Digital Reading Lab, but I've also worked for a very long time with the DAISY Consortium and the Regium Foundation. I'm a software developer and I'm based in the UK.
Awesome. And Simon.
I'm Simon. I'm working as an accessibility tester for NNELS, and I'm based in Western Canada.
Amazing. All right. So we have an excellent panel, as you can all see here today. I'm just going to launch directly into the questions. And my method is if someone doesn't answer in the first 5 seconds, I'm just going to call on you. So be prepared. So for our first question today, what advances and developments are happening with reading systems with respect to accessibility? Why don't we start with you, Lars? I know you've been working hard.
Yeah, I've been working hard. I actually published something just like 15 or 20 minutes ago. So yeah, I would say that all the reading systems on the market are developing really quickly. I think it's fascinating to see. I love the work that Daniel is doing with Thorium, and Rick, I'm sorry, I don't use Vital Source that much, but I've heard very good things. And we, of course, have been spending, I would say, the last 12 months just trying to really push this and make things better and better and more intuitive and speak to more disabled users or not so abled users maybe. So no, I think it's looking good. There's much work to be done, and I think I invite all us developers to join and try to talk more amongst us, maybe put together some kind of working group or something so we can start streamlining our feature sets and making it easier for producers to produce books that look fabulous and work fabulous across all reading systems. I think that is super important.
So just to give a recap, our first question is about advances and developments. What advances and developments are happening with reading systems with respect to accessibility? Why don't we go to Daniel? What's up in Thorium land?
Well, I'd say there's a definite convergence, a continued convergence towards web technologies. So tonight I'll be talking and sharing my insights from the perspective of Thorium, which is a desktop app for Windows, Linux, and Mac. So it's not a web app, it's not a website, but it is built with web technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So we use the exact same W3C guidelines that you'd be using if you were developing a website. I know Colibrio here, represented by Lars, they have a fantastic web reader that implements accessibility features based on existing W3C recommendations, such as WCAG, Web Accessibility Initiative Content Authoring Guidelines. I think that's the one and only time I'll be spelling out this acronym. Area for semantic roles and adding accessibility features to HTML documents. There's definitely a very productive technology stack that makes it possible for us in Thorium to improve our level of accessibility.
Awesome. And Rick?
I think there's two really exciting things happening right now around reading systems and accessibility, and they were touched on already. But the first is it's assumed now. I'm 30 years in this industry, and it used to be always a specialty case. It was a one-off. It was a go here to do this for accessibility, and now it's assumed. You have to have it to participate, and that's a wonderful thing that has happened. And the reason it can be assumed now is the other thing happening, and that is standards. You know, we have gone from 20, 30 years ago when everyone was always saying, so why isn't, you know, fill in the blank, doing the right thing with whatever area that they were worried about. And now we've got a great specification for file formats. We've got a great specification in EPUB around how can we do accessibility there. We've got checkers that can check it. We've got authoring systems that can create it. There's a lot of these last mile things that are getting done because of interoperable specifications. And it's exciting to think about where we can go, like Lars talked about, in terms of even feature sets starting to become interoperable and then exchanges of information in the future. So to me, it's just very exciting, very affirming for all the work that people have done over the years to get us to this point.
Yeah. All right. I guess the next question, what are reading systems or retailers doing to ensure the content they display or ingest is accessible? I think I'm gonna go to you, Rick, first, actually. I think you have the most to do with this.
I hate to lose you in our session here, but probably need to go to the metadata session, because that's the biggest thing, I think, is letting people know what's in it before they buy it. How does it going to work with your application? What does your application and reading system do? All of this information that they need to know before when they're discovering it, as if they're an instructor and they're requiring it for their course, or if they're a user and they're buying it, or if it's trade title and they want to read it. Metadata is so critical and so key. And then understanding not just metadata about the content, but about the app and sort of what their capabilities are. Just being transparent about that is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Lars,
what do you do to push against publishers that are providing PDF? I was just in communication with an author and publisher, and they had both a PDF and an EPUB version, and only the PDF version was available on VitalSource, and I screamed at them for that. And I don't know if they fixed it, but what do you do to, say, do you really want to provide us with a PDF?
Well, the key in that scenario for us is the consumer and the institution holds the keys there, because they know they need an accessible format for their users, for their students, for their learners. They know they need an accessible format for legal issues and for compliance. And they have the strength to be able to push back stronger. So we encourage the delivery of that. We encourage getting that. We have started actually doing what I would call public shaming. If they're not in our metadata, if they don't provide us with metadata, we say, hey, talk to the publisher, because we don't have any metadata about the accessibility of this file. And so we're encouraging that through the means we can and through contacting them. But the people who are out there, the consumers who are out there purchasing, they hold the keys, because it's all about finances from the publishers and providing that into the marketplace.
I'll jump in here too, because I think this is also a space where people like retailers or ingestion streams can be opinionated. Kobo, a couple of years ago, we just stopped ingesting PDFs. We said we're not selling them anymore. Providing the reading systems to provide them is a pain. It was to continue supporting PDF, but it also just, they weren't selling well and they weren't achieving the content goals that we wanted. So we just stopped accepting them, and that seems to work pretty well, at least so far. Lars or Daniel, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this too.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry,
Lars? No, go ahead, Lars.
I forgot the question, but I had an answer. Wendy, please remind me.
Reading systems and retailers, what are you doing to ensure content that they display or ingest is accessible?
I'm getting old. Okay, so what I wanted to say was that, of course, being a framework, the plan has been since the get-go pretty much to break apart the content as much as possible and expose as much data about the content as possible through the APIs that we offer. What I am planning to kind of like evangelize to our customers is to use the APIs to actually, even if there is no accessibility metadata, you can still using our APIs go through the content and give people heads up if you find that there are missing missing semantics in the document, for example, or whatnot. So I think that I hate being pragmatic, but sometimes you just need to get things working, right? And while we wait for proper accessibility metadata, I think it's good if the reading systems can expose obvious flaws in publications to the user, as an interim solution. So that I think would be a good thing if, and I also have my accessibility annotations initiative that I always mention, which would be a cooperation between us three, Daniel and Rick and us, so we could share accessibility metadata across systems. So yeah, let's talk more about that. Let's become friends, even better friends. That's all.
Daniel.
Thank you.
Daniel.
Well, from my experience in the Thorium project, Thorium started out as an EPUB reading system. We knew we were going to add support for DAISY digital talking books as well, which we did. We've got support for audiobook formats and comic book formats. Ironically, we also added support for EPUB, for PDF, not because we claim to offer a better reading experience than, say, your default reader on Mac, which is called Preview, or Acrobat on Windows, whichever, but just because PDF is ubiquitous and we just needed to support it. So we use an existing off-the-shelf component, PDF.js for JavaScript. So it's the same component that you'd be using on a website to render PDFs. And that's what we do. Anyway, so that was a side note. Going back to content production. So I'm not an expert in anything really, but I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to content production. My perspective is really from the reading system end. So I'll go on a slight tangent here and I'll say, my experience is that it's a bit like a dance, a bit like tango, between the content that we have to ingest in the reading system and what we implement as reading system developers to make that work. There's a push-pull sort of passionate dance between these two sometimes conflicting ends of the spectrum. But actually, there's also a third actor in that dance, unusually, which makes things even more complicated. That's a screen reader and other assistive technology that sort of inserts itself between the user experience, the end user, let's say, and the content, and that's what creates as a whole the user experience. So at times it's a very frustrating experience, but it's also very rewarding when we find ways to make it work. So that was my side tangent.
You know what? It's a great tangent because my next question is going to be about assistive technology. So I'm going to loop Simon in on this because we haven't heard from him yet. But Simon, accessibility tester, and I know he's a reader. What are you looking for in a reading system? Do you look for specific features depending on the content that you're reading? Have you any good and bad experiences? And when it comes to assistive technology, how do you look for it to work with products?
Well, my answer depends somewhat heavily on what platform I'm using. So on my phone, it's, for instance, very inconvenient to use a reading system that does not have a read aloud feature because my screen stays unlocked. Um, but I would not necessarily want a read aloud feature on a Windows desktop because I can just use my screen reader say all command. In general, though, I think it boils down to I'm looking for simplicity. I would like the features that I need, the basic features of the reading system, to be accessible in a way that makes it fairly apparent how to get there. I said this in the user perspectives panel, but one of the reading systems that I used for the longest on Windows was just a giant text box with a couple of keyboard shortcuts for jumping between headings and jumping to bookmarks and table of contents and such. And it does not, I don't even know if it properly supports EPUB 3, so there's definitely some downsides. But for a while, that was perfect because it was just the simplest thing on the planet. I do find that there is a trend towards web technologies now, which is good because the bare minimum is still more accessible than the bare minimum using most other UI toolkits. So that's good. I think in terms of bad experiences, the only really bad experiences I've had aren't applicable anymore. There were some reading systems that basically by way of DRM forced you to use them and nothing else to read certain content, and they weren't accessible. That seems to be changing, which is great. Libby, I'll call them out, have become much more accessible over the last couple of years. Kindle used to be pretty broken in the early 2010s and maybe even mid, and that's much better now. Sorry, was there another part to this?
No, there was not. That was perfect. I guess
Okay.
to flip it around to the reading system perspective, what do you do to ensure that assistive technologies and the users who use them are having good experiences with your apps?
We do a lot of work in that area. I mentioned earlier that it's assumed now to have accessibility. It's required at VitalSource. Every development team is annually trained. We have third parties that come in and hold our feet to the fire to make sure we're doing it right and review us and independently work with our teams and their stand-ups and writing bugs into Jira and making sure that we're doing what we say that we're doing and claim that we're doing. And then even down to code reviews of development teams, we'll turn off the screen as we're going through a code review to make sure that things are working right with screen readers and that developers understand the issues that are going on. We'll work with accessible teams at our institutions with the DSO offices or students that have different accommodations and make sure that we hear from the end users and work with them. It's an ongoing, never-ending journey that you don't ever arrive at, but you have to continue down the path and continue doing it.
Lars?
And yeah, I've been working so much. Basically, we are a small team, right? And just as Daniel, I guess you also, I mean, you work at Daisy, you know all this, but it's important to understand, I think, from a user's point of view, and especially if you're in an organization that is planning to build or implement a reading system that is fully accessible. That accessibility, I don't care how much people tweet about accessibility just being about using semantic HTML or whatnot. Accessibility, because of what Daniel spoke of, because of the very, very varied implementations of the accessibility technologies. Implementing good accessibility that is stable across all accessibility technologies is really freaking hard. And it's going to make your budget for the project, if you want to do it properly, especially if it's your first project, it's going to be ×2 the time it will take to implement the user interface and stuff. And you just need to accept that. And so that is an important point. People don't want to talk about that, but it's a super important point. not undersell the difficulty. And I mean, it's not just up to the developers of reading systems. Reading systems are hybrid technologies. And there are real limitations for reasons in you know, we as developers of hybrid technologies do not have, and actually of web technologies, basically, we don't have the same luxuries as a native developer would have, because a native developer can listen for you know, the behavior of the accessibility technologies and follow them around the user interface and know exactly where they are and what they're doing and stuff. But in webland, that is not a thing. You never know what the screen reader is doing. So and for a reading system, that is darn, you know, it's very inconvenient, let's say, that you never know where the accessibility focus of the screen reader is. That makes life really freaking hard. Daniel, tell them all about this pain. Because we need a web API to fix it.
Yes, the inconvenient truth of accessible web development. Well, look, you've both already said many important and interesting things. So what I'll add is I'm one half of the Thorium development team. We're very small as well. And I'm sighted, for those of you who don't know me. And my colleague is also sighted. So we don't have the expertise with screen readers. And we rely on external contributions, testers who are willing to give a go and engage in a feedback loop with us. I would say in terms of cost, to add to what Lars already described, documentation is also a very important point. So we as developers tend to be very bad at documenting things other than, you know, we see technical documentation. I'm talking about end user documentation here. So we do maintain, you know, like a reference for our keyboard shortcuts, and but there's so much more we need to really make the app accessible. You know, the first point of entry is not necessarily trial and error with the app. It's reading a couple of, you know, paragraphs or pages of documentation just to figure out what the application is all about and how it works.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here too, because I'm really jealous of my fellow panelists because they're a little bit further ahead than I am, or we are at Kobo in this process. But I'll say, because we're a little bit further behind, I've gotten to take a slightly different approach where we have leaned pretty heavily into testing with people with lived experience. So we've engaged companies like Fable. We're fingers crossed we're going to get to start working with Daisy and NNELS soon as well, to start understanding what users of our platform are going to want to do with our apps and our readers, and then work from there. Because we want to understand what people want to do. We want to facilitate all of that while obviously ensuring that our reader continues to work and is accessible to everyone. The other thing, I would say an interesting challenge for us as well is because we produce an e-ink device. E-ink devices pose a slightly different challenge in terms of accessibility because we write the software for those. We are not reliant on existing frameworks. We have to, you know, kind of build our own. And up until recently, some of our devices didn't even have audio. So we recently added Bluetooth, which is going to open a door, but also a whole new adventure in terms of making those accessible, because NVDA is, you know, not an installable application on our devices. But I also would add that, like, the other important part is to consider the needs of the user first, especially when it comes to, like, we don't want to try and interface with assistive technology by like trying to figure out what they're using or trying to we want it to work without knowing any of that information, and we should always just be testing as broadly as possible to ensure that, you know, we're respecting user privacy and user needs, and we're not, you know, we're not trying to guess at anything. We're just making sure that it works. So I'm going to go to the next question, which is, I think this is going to be maybe an audience favorite. How do reading systems determine the priority of building features or fixing issues? And I'm going to go to Daniel first.
We throw coins, either pound coins in my country or euros in Paris, depending on which side it lands on. We decide. No, of course not. We have a bug triage process, and especially at this stage of the project, Thorium is becoming more mature now. We are really trying to prioritize things based on user needs. I mean, there's some great feedback and some really exciting features that people are requesting, but we just can't do it, on our own. And it's an open source project, of course. So as all open source projects, it's one thing to say that it is open source. It's another. The main challenge is to onboard people with technical skills to help with translations, localization, with adding features, with extensibility, all that stuff. So, yeah, I look forward to hearing from Lars, Riggs, and others. I'll stop here.
I'll go to Rick next and unmute.
Sure. We hold focus groups with our users quarterly to make sure that we're hearing from them. If we're doing the kinds of things, if things are working the way they want, if there's issues that they're having, and also to test future prototypes of features that we're looking to bring out. And so we're trying to always hear that voice of the customer, but then our customer success team and our publisher relationship teams also work directly with our customers to make sure if there are issues that they get escalated quickly. A great example, last week we heard very quickly, start of a semester, there was an issue with math rendering in a number of different books. And it turned out, given a certain order of events, that the software we were using to render MathML, called MathJax, had an issue that they had just fixed. It went to the top of our list, and within 6 hours, we had new versions of our apps out and updated to make sure that we incorporated that latest fix from them. So things can bump up, things can get prioritized if they're stopping learning from happening, or if there's an error happening, or if there's something critical out there. But other than that, it's a fairly regular voice of the customer to make sure we hear what the right things we should be doing.
Awesome. Lars?
Well, since we are a framework, if you look at the demo readers that I smacked together, those are just implementations to help companies around the world and schools and governments and whatnot build accessible and nice reading systems. But so we have a different stance. We move slower because we implement standards. The only thing we do, basically, we never come up with something. We make sure that we implement the APIs as closely as possible to the standards. Anybody who knows me will know that I'm very bullish about following standards. So in our case, because of that, I don't think we have that many bugs per se. And when it comes to features, we are very careful, because many people around the world kind of rely on our software being very stable. So, but of course, once in a while there pops, especially I think we need to add stuff to be more forgiving. I can, for example, say that we have had, I'm super happy about this, so many new media overlays books. And in some cases, because it's a new thing, right? So people start producing media overlays where they have almost overlapping, boundaries between the segments, audio segments. So in many cases, it's more about us needing to see where we can implement, where in the stack of APIs we can implement lenience, is that a word? So that we are more, so that we are friendly to the developer, and also, of course, to the end user, so that they don't, we fail gracefully, as they say, or we adapt gracefully. So that's the thing we do. But otherwise, we just make sure that everything is super stable. And again, if it's in the standard, it's in the APIs. That's what we strive for. So if you want to build a reading system, you will not need to ask if it's supported by Collibrio. We will try to make our best effort at, following and implementing the standards.
Cool. I guess I'll say it's interesting to have, we have so many different types of reading systems here. So like from the retail perspective, most of our like feature and issue driven questions kind of come from, it hurts to say this, financial impact. How the scale of a bug can be books don't load. And if books don't load, then we have a really big problem and we've got to fix it immediately. But when we're looking at things like features, we're often looking at areas that we want to focus in on. So for the last couple of years, for instance, if you've used Kobo, you've probably noticed that we've gotten really into nonfiction reading and features related to nonfiction reading. So releasing devices with styluses or improving our navigation capabilities so that you can, shift back and forth in an ebook really quickly. And focusing on features like that, because that was what nonfiction readers wanted, but it also had, every time we implement a feature like that, we want to see, does it have a cascade effect to other types of content? And which most of the time it often does. When we look at accessibility, I always try to look for the accessibility angle in just about any feature we try to implement, because oftentimes we work on a goals-based system where instead of saying, oh, we want to, add text to speech, the actual thing we're actually asking is, how do we make people want to read more books? Well, one of the ways might be to add something like text to speech, or to, there's a number of different ways you can do this. And my role is always to see, okay, well, what's the accessibility angle? Is there a feature that we can add or a thing that we can add to this feature to make it more accessible and, raise the profile of our products and make it people happier? And then for issues, it's just impact, pure impact. How many users does this affect? How bad is it? Things like that. George, we're going to do questions in 5 minutes. Just a heads up. But
Great.
then so we have a couple more questions. I think we've already touched on priority and things. So I want to ask, because we only have 5 minutes left. This is the dream question. And it is, what does an ideal reading system look like? What could they be? And how far away are we from that vision? And I want to start with Simon.
So I don't know that I have a single dream reading system, but it tends to be that reading systems will have some features, but not others. Like they will have amazing navigation and amazing features, but it will only read a page at a time, and so forth. I did think about this quite a lot, and I don't know if I have a dream reading system in mind, but ideally, I would like to see more reading systems that support accessibility metadata, and more that maybe support automatic features like OCR of things that need it.
That sounds cool. Daniel.
Well, you could unpack that question and expand for a few minutes. So I'll keep it short. I published a link to a Google Doc in the Slack #reading-systems. I can post it in the chat here as well later on. This is my notepad. I jotted down a few notes for this meeting, and it sort of lists a bunch of features in Thorium that relate to accessibility and usability. And clearly I completely agree with Simon. We have to look at the feature set and make sure it's, depending on the type of user, you'll have different needs. So we could debate on what's important or not. But for me, a reading system really should be sort of transparent, non-intrusive. It should be just there. You double click on the file, or if you're on a platform that doesn't have a file system like a tablet, it just happens. It's performance is a very important point too. And I think we can do better in Thorium, but we are at the mercy of the technology stack that we're using in Thorium, which is inherently slower than native technologies. So there's only so much we can do. There's a compromise there. But for me, with EDR Lab, we put a lot of focus on accessibility. So this is clearly something we're passionate about. So whenever we have positive feedback, we take that as encouragement, and it hurts when we have negative feedback. But as I think Rick said earlier on, it's a constant sort of effort, a continued effort to get it right, and you never really get there because technologies advance, right? And you need to keep up with the operating systems updates, with the updates of screen readers themselves. The web platform continuously evolves as well. For example, Thorium is built with web technologies, as I said earlier on, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it's also built on top of a particular web browser engine called Chromium, which powers Microsoft's own Edge web browser. It's also in Google Chrome web browser and many others. So, if Chromium doesn't implement a feature that we need, such as MathML, we'll be using MathJax, just like VitalSource's reader, to display accessible MathML. And I could carry on like that with many other features that we depend on. Yeah, so that's it.
Rick?
So to me, the ideal reading system, and VitalSource works in the education, training, learning environment. And so from that perspective, Daniel touched on it, I think, perfectly. It's one that disappears. It gets out of the way. As a learner, I need to get into the environment that I'm learning. I need to be able to interact with it. I need to be able to test my knowledge. I need to be able to understand where I need to review and move on. And the reading system should be a part of that process. It shouldn't be a step in it. It should just be invisible and facilitate my access to that information. Whether I'm sighted, whether I'm have other disabilities, mobility issues, whatever my issues or my accommodations are that I need to be, it should just disappear and be gone. That's my ideal.
All right, and we're almost running out of time, so Lars, really fast. Really
fast. I just want, I read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi and comic books and whatnot. And to be honest, I want, you said people here, I wanted to kind of get out of the way, but I also wanted to augment my reading experience when I wanted to. So I've always said that I want an API for a book where I can basically ask questions to ask my reading system questions, and it will help me with reminding me who a character is or find stuff in the book. And I think we're getting closer to this. This is something that I will be into a lot in the coming years, natural language processing and stuff, to be able to talk to my reading system. I want it now. Yes. I just want the reading system that Simon wants, and Melissa yesterday spoke about wanting just one place where you could read anything however she wanted, and I want that. That's my dream reading system. Let's get into questions. George, you raised your hand first, so I think you get to ask the first question.
Is epubtest.org helping you? What should we do more? And for those of you that don't know about it, we do at epubtest.org. We have test books and we report on various reading systems. I think most of the developers here are familiar with us, but how are we doing? What can we do to improve it? I've got a reading system agenda I have to send out for this coming Tuesday at noon at 11 Eastern. So, and all of the people here are welcome to join us in those meetings.
I actually have an answer for you, George, because I was just looking at epubtest.org with a coworker the other day, and the one question we had was, we use the EPUBs. It was great to see what's supported and how well, but I think more user experience feedback would be helpful when interacting with these very specific components or these navigational elements. What did the user like or not like about this particular reading system's behavior with this document? Because the documents are good, and it's good to know that these features are supported or, not supported, but, did they want something more from it? Like, it's great that it passed, but was it a good experience, or was it
how many backflips did you have to do to get there?
Exactly.
Okay.
I don't know if Lars or Rick or Daniel.
Well, we do use the publications from the EPUB test suite and the DAISY test suite as well. They're very important publications, straight to the point. They distill a few problems down to their essence, and we're able to test features with a narrow focus. But I completely agree with Wendy about user feedback. And I will also say, and the onus really is on us as reading system developers to find other sources of publications that will, for example, stress test a reading system in terms of performance. Just an anecdote, we support DAISY digital public talking books, which tend to have very large DT book XML documents in the case of DAISY 3. And that's a definite killer for an app like Thorium that wasn't designed to handle huge documents. So those are the fun things that we have to deal with. But the onus is on us to find other relevant sources of publications.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I think it's a good point, though, just quickly, that we maybe, and this is why I was arguing for like a working group where all the reading system developers and vendors get together and share publications and testing strategies and whatnot. Thank you.
Maybe we need a CG. That might be what we need. I believe I saw Melissa first on the question queue. So I'm gonna ask Melissa to go.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's actually really fascinating, and like I'm so happy to be listening to the reading system perspective. And actually, there's quite a lot of overlap with the panel about digital literacy. And I will actually be talking a lot about the reading system. I guess I have one of the questions, which is not really like well formulated, but it's about PDF. And somebody mentioned that they are trying to be able to read PDF. And for instance, me, this is one of the big issue I have at university. It's like I want to use accessible reader, but in the same time I have always PDF, and sometimes I have to switch between one reading app to another, and even if it's not accessible, I still sometimes have to read it, and I do it. So yeah, I would be curious to know what are the thoughts on this. And the other question is, I'm just curious about if you manage to get perspective from dyslexic reader in your feedback, because it's quite different needs in terms of accessibility. So yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know, Rick, maybe, do you have any thoughts on PDF accessibility?
We do it because we're committed to accessibility. It's a pain, it's hard. Mainly it's hard to get publishers to mark things up right, because if they don't mark it up right, it's worse trying to do it than anything else. And reading order and all of that becomes an issue. But I mean, most of the people on here who know me for the last 20 years of being involved in championing EPUB and trying to get people to move over to that. And we're excited. You know, we look at the vast majority of the content that we distribute now to our users is EPUB. It's very small portion of it is PDF now. And we love that. We love that trend. So.
That's good. All right. We're running out of time, and we have 2 questions remaining, so I'm going to be really fast. Rianne, you're next.
Thanks. So I'm curious how reading system companies are ensuring that people with lived experience and their expertise are being utilized and ingrained in all aspects of what they do.
Who wants to go first?
I can say we
Lars,
work together with. Sorry. Yeah, we always, as I said, we always implement and eat our own dog food. We implement our own reading systems, as I've said, and we have testing groups for DAISY, and you know, I get feedback from blind users, and my daughter is dyslexic, so she uses. I mean, I'm the worst ADD person you've met, so I also have my problems reading. So yeah, but we use DAISY and people who communicate with me through.
So you're not employing
channels.
anyone?
No, as soon as we have finances enough to do that, we will definitely do it, because it's on our roadmap, most definitely, because we need it, right? So
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
We do
Um,
employ some associates with different disabilities, and then we also contract out annually to make sure that we can bring those people in to make sure that we have the testing needed to close those gaps.
Anything outside of testing?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
So like, you know, your human resources, your other aspects outside of testing, like your development, your marketing.
Yeah, we without getting into specifics, I could probably name half a dozen different people with different accommodations that are required, both in marketing and developers. We've got 3 blind developers, different accommodations in different areas. Hard to get into specifics on a public call like this.
Oh yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
all right. And we have one last question and we only have 1 more minute. So Megan, go ahead.
Okay. I might follow up after to get more of a detailed response, but so I work at UBC Press, and just wondering how best can I communicate bugs and issues when it comes to accessibility with ebook developers or e-reader developers.
I'm sure we can all post in the channel our emails / the places that we have on our site. So I have Kobo has an accessibility email that we put on our website for anyone to reach out to, but we can put that all in the channel because you can reach out to any of us, and I'm sure we would all happily answer your questions or get your issues.
I'll follow up after. It's a little more in depth. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you all back in the main room. Thank you to our amazing panelists. You guys did amazing.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.